So certainty is not the same thing as actually knowing something to be true, right? They're different. Often we can see in other people, especially more so than in ourselves, perhaps, we can see that sometimes the less they actually know, the more it's sort of cloaked in greater certainty, you know, whether to convince other people or maybe even to convince themselves. It's almost an inverse relationship, you know, the less we actually know, the more certain we are, to make up the difference. Almost like a hot air balloon, if it's being weighted down by sort of tenuous beliefs, you just need more hot air, right, to keep it off the ground. So, but when we, let's say we get into spirituality and we start reading things, and people, even highly respected people, even people that have been dead for centuries, may be quoted as saying things, and they may be true or relatively true. Obviously, nothing that's spoken will be absolutely true, but they may be helpful. But what we can do is take what is said as possible pointers. Okay, if there's a resonance with the person that said whatever, suggested a practice, suggested a direction to look, suggested the possibility of what might be found, then we might trust that to the degree that we're willing to look for ourselves. What isn't helpful is just to believe it, because just the belief, by definition, means that we don't actually know. We just believe it. You know, so in spirituality, belief is like kryptonite. You know, it'll disable our search more easily than anything. And the reason for that is that belief can so easily be mistaken for truth. It's just easier, right? We don't have to do the hard work. We just believe something. Somebody said something, they seem respectable, they've been around for a long time, they have a lot of followers. I'll go with that. And if that's gives comfort to a person, wonderful. I have no problem with that. Everybody gets to choose. But if we have this urge, for whatever reason, to look deeper, to see what this life is actually about, then belief gets in the way. We can still use pointers that may be suggested, directions to look, practices to undertake. Fine, we can try it out, but the real value is to do it for ourselves, find out in our own direct firsthand experience whether it's true or not. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. We don't know until we actually find out for ourselves. We don't know. You know, it doesn't matter how certain we are. You know, it doesn't matter how fervently we believe something. You know, the degree of being fervent has actually nothing to do with what's actually true. You know, if we know something's true, there's no need to sort of, fervently argue in favor of it, defend it, insist on it. If what we know is actually true, it's actually already true for the other person equally. So exactly who are you trying to convince? But most of the time, this sense of, being certain, being overconfident, in what we believe has much more to do with our own comfort than it has to do with what's actually true. And I can see there's a, it's comforting to have, sort of ready-made theories or philosophies or religions that you can just subscribe to. And, you have a ready-made code of conduct, you have, a worldview that's, acceptable in society, perhaps to a large number of people, opinions that, are commonly supported. There's not a lot of, thinking that's required. You just adopt either by conditioning or with some intention, adopt a certain lifestyle, code of conduct, philosophy. And there you go. You can, live a reasonably successful life. Great, wonderful, no problem. Okay. But it would be a mistake to take such beliefs for what's true. Okay, so by true spirituality, what I mean is actually looking for oneself in one's own direct experience for what's true. And the way I'm using that word true or truth is what's true for all people at all times, under all circumstances. Doesn't change over time. It doesn't change depending on the circumstances. It's not true for one person and not the other. It's just true. That narrows the realm of possibilities. So, but if our desire for whatever reason in this lifetime is to find out what that actually is, then we can't get there by belief. We can't actually get there by trying to figure it all out either. Because what that realization of truth isn't a concept, it's not a belief, it's not a theory, it's not a philosophy, it's not an experience either. It's actually what you are. So all attempts that we as individual people make to try to get there is actually in the wrong direction, because it's what we already are, our deepest nature. It's what actually is functioning through and as these bodies already. We're looking for it in the wrong direction. We're looking for it out there, and it is what's looking, what's noticing whatever the source of input. Okay, so if we settle for beliefs, the longer we sort of hold on to those beliefs, the tendency is to become more certain of them. And I'd suggest one of the reasons for that is that life tends to reinforce what you believe about it. If you believe that the world is a dangerous place, scary, out to get you, then the world seems to provide those circumstances, and you become more convinced of it. If you believe that people are untrustworthy, life has a way of sending untrustworthy people to your door. If you believe that your role in life is to help other people, life will send you plenty of helpless people. And this is life's generosity, actually, to give you sort of fulfill your beliefs to the extent that they become more and more clear, more and more acute, to the point that you question them. Because spirituality really isn't coming up with the right set of beliefs. It's really to question all beliefs. It's not to arrive at the right package of ideas, put all the pieces together. No, it's actually the relaxation into a state of not knowing, being available for, being open to, fresh. Rather than viewing things through the lens of what we're certain about. And in spirituality, high intelligence isn't necessarily an asset. Intelligence is fine, but a lot of times people that have a high level of intelligence are very comfortable with believing in themselves as being capable of figuring out whatever, everything that needs to be figured out. The only problem was when you get into spirituality, it's not something to be figured out. It's not, it's because it's not a concept, right? It's not a puzzle. And behind every event, every effort to figure out how life works, there is this innate awareness that's watching us struggle to do that. That's the sort of tragic humor of it. What we're looking for is already fully alive in all of us equally. So when we are trying to figure it out, we're dealing totally in the world of concepts, trying to put the jigsaw puzzle together, and doesn't work. Doesn't work. So there's several examples of how certainty blinds us to the reality. They're all sort of famous examples in history. One is when the European explorers first arrived on the shores of, I think it was South America. The natives there were so certain how everything worked, what was possible, that the idea of, large mass sailing ships arriving on this ocean that they'd never seen or conceived before wasn't possible. So when the ships actually did arrive, they were so certain that they didn't actually see the ships. Whether that's actually true or not, I don't know, but makes a good story. Another example that has a little more provability is that Galileo, when he first invented his telescope, invited friends and acquaintances to look through it, all the marvelous things he was able to see through his telescope. And there were quite a few people that refused to do that, right? They didn't want their beliefs to be tampered with by the reality of it, reality of what they could actually see for themselves. So they actually refused to look through the telescope. Okay, third example is before the days of Louis Pasteur, and tragically for some decades after that, surgeons and doctors that were delivering babies didn't feel it necessary to wash their hands between deliveries. And they were so certain that that was unnecessary that many would-be mothers died tragically, even for decades afterwards, after his discoveries. because of certainty. We know, we don't want any new information because we already know. And it's sort of like, in horse racing, they put blinders on the horses so that they're not distracted by anything else other than running straight ahead in the direction that, the rider wants them to go. And certainty is sort of like that. We don't want to be bothered by any of life's sort of annoying little tendencies to challenge our beliefs. We want to, proceed confidently with certainty, have a high degree of belief in where we're going. So there's several things that are often used to maintain that level of certainty. One is skepticism, right? Skepticism doesn't actually require much effort. It's just like anything that new and different than what I already believed. No, I just doubt it. It's probably not true. It's sort of like just a knee-jerk reaction. When the doctor hits your knee with that little hammer, it's just an automatic reaction. Well, that can't be true. It's not that the reverse of that is better, right? The reverse of skepticism, the other side of that coin, is just naive belief, right? So you have naive belief on one side. Oh, somebody said so, so I'll believe it. Versus skepticism. Oh, that can't be true. But they're both, you can see that they're both related to belief. One is for, one is against, but they're still both focused on the belief, with confidence that we know and have the ability to discern what's true from what's not. That's what it's founded on. So skepticism is an effective way to remain certain. Right? Another way is just avoidance, right? Just a lot of times, like in a small remote village where people have lived there for generations, talk to the same people day after day, have the same conversations for decades at a time. Those beliefs tend to get codified. Everybody sort of adopts the same opinions and has the same outlook. And if there's not a lot of travelers coming through, that may last for a long time. Not even necessarily wrong, but it's just encapsulated within, I'd say, a community or a group of friends or a lifestyle where you're just not exposed to anything other than what you want to be exposed to. Right. So these days, the internet does that for us. If we're plugged into digital news, the internet notices our preferences through these algorithms. And so we don't even have to decide, what things we want to avoid or not. The algorithms, Google will do it for us, Facebook or whatever, right? They'll decide what we want to see for us. So we don't even have to go to the effort to avoid knowing about something. The internet will do it for us. So we can see the effect of this over the last decade or so, where you have this divisiveness in politics and social issues where people on both sides are sort of equally convinced of being right and being certain, and that the other people are equally out to lunch. Right? Because we see only what the internet feed wants us to see. Okay, third way is ignorance, right? So the root of ignorance is to ignore, right? It's not, I'm using it in that sense, not a sense of intelligence, but to actually ignore, to go out of your way not to see something, right? Just not to be exposed to it, just not even hear it. don't go anywhere near it. So that works too. But probably the most common way is just unconscious oblivion, right? Never even going through an entire lifetime and never even asking a question like, what's this about? What am I? What's life about? You know, what's the deepest truth of my nature? Those kind of questions never even arises to the level of possibility. So without that movement, we can remain quite confident, assured, move with certainty in the world, just because we've never even considered anything else. You know, we're just oblivious to it. That works. So in religions, a lot of people, take religions as the source of truth, but in most cases, I would say they're really founded on belief. So we have a founder of a religion, someone that in all likelihood had, deep insight into the nature of their being, nature of existence, and tried their best to pass on that awareness of, you know, through their actions, through talks. And then their followers and descendants and organizers did whatever they did with it. And in a lot of cases, those future um, helpers within that tradition did with, not always, but often with great sincerity, right? Really wanting to help. But often, if that original understanding wasn't transmitted to these people that are helping to organize the future groups, then the transmission gets clouded, right? So often it can become more about propagating the tradition than it is about leading or showing the way to awakening, right? So a lot of the rituals and beliefs and practices in some of the religions that have been around for a long time don't necessarily lead to the state of awakeness that the founder experienced, discovered, and what the current day adherents to that religion are left with is worshiping the founder rather than recognizing that possibility in themselves. There's a big difference. So this is not at all to say that, religions don't serve a purpose, but a lot of them are based on belief, right? Believe the correct set of beliefs and there will be a benefit. Word faith is used commonly in religions, right? It's my faith. I have faith. But often what's meant is not so much faith as hope, right? Hope that if I adhere to this set of beliefs and practices, then there'll be a beneficial outcome, right? Maybe a ticket to heaven. But that's hope. Hope that if I do this, I'll get that. Hope that if I behave this way, life will be good to me in return. That's different than faith. Faith, as I'm using the term, is just the willingness to be on board. The willingness to be on board regardless of what may or may not happen. Willingness, right? Not hope that something in particular will happen. It's sort of the same difference in prayer. A lot of times prayer is actually a pleading, right? I'm asking for something, maybe something for myself, maybe something for a loved one, or relieved of a burden. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's good to know that there's a difference between that asking movement and um, sitting in one's own silent receptivity. There's a difference, right? So when we look at the spirituality that I'm speaking of here, it is not about adopting the right set of beliefs. It's actually about questioning the beliefs that we do have. It's not about adding to. It's actually about subtracting from what we think we already know. When we think we already know something, it's like having the blinders on. We're not willing to look at new things or reassess old things. It's like we know there's no reason to look. But when we really allow ourselves to drop into a sense of uncertainty, like, when I really stop and think about it, I may have some ideas, some beliefs, some hopes about what may be true, but what do I actually know? Not much. Really not much. And when we're used to the comfort of being certain about where we're going, what we're doing, why we're doing it, to drop down from that level of certainty into willingness not to know, sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds like it would just be total folly. Why would anyone do that? And probably the only reason why anyone would do that is that when there has been sufficient suffering or frustration as a result of proceeding in a direction with certainty for long enough. It's actually maybe the one benefit of certainty. It'll drag you through everything because you're certain, right? It'll wear you out. Life has that capacity, right? And so at some point, through striving, through effort, I know how to get there. I know what the spiritual game is. I've just got to work harder at it, more penance, more sacrifice, more meditation, more beliefs, the right beliefs, more and more striving. And if there's a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, it is in exhausting yourself. Just playing yourself out to the degree that you can't be induced to run down the next path after some imagined goal. It just burns it out. It's a valid path. A lot of people have awakened as a result of going down this path of certainty. I know where I'm going, and I'm just going to go as hard as I can in that direction. So it's a valid path. Fortunately, it's not the only one, and it's not the easiest one. The easiest one is just to see the immediate availability of what's true in this moment. What's true in this moment is true in every moment. You don't have to wait for a special enlightenment moment. It's actually a peak experience is actually not required. What's required is the willingness to look for ourselves at what's actually discoverable for ourselves, rather than dependent on what somebody else says, right? Rather than being willing to proceed solely based on belief. Pointers are helpful, but unless you try it out for them yourself, they're not the same as actually knowing. So in the scientific world, there's also great certainty. And the certainty is so prevalent that nearly all people never question it. And the commonly accepted model of the world is that the world that we see outside is fundamental, materialistic view. You know, there's tables and chairs and clouds and bodies and that populate this world. That's what's real. And the only confusing part is that is this thing called consciousness or awareness. And the explanation is, well, these bodies clearly exist and are fundamental, and consciousness also appears to exist. Therefore, consciousness must be a byproduct of this material world, this bodies. You know, so essentially the things that we're made out of, atoms and such, the molecules within our head somehow produce awareness. That's the assumption, right? But in that sense, it's not all that different than most religions, that at their fundamental level, there is an assumption. And the assumption in the case of science is material world is fundamental. Consciousness is a derivative of it. No proof, though, and there never will be. And the reason that it will never will be that some future experimenter, you know, a millennium from now, whatever experiment they're doing will be done entirely within the awareness of that experimenter, looking to find the source of awareness. So a bit like a dog chasing its own tail. So whatever the experiment is, it can only happen within awareness. But the presumption is that the awareness, that the material world is fundamental. So you get off on the wrong assumption. It's very hard to find the answer to that. So this is, we can use teachers and scriptures and books, and most usefully to take them as suggested avenues to look. Right? They may describe what may be found. That's okay, but we can just hold that as loosely as a possibility rather than as a belief. Right? Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Maybe they know what they're talking about, maybe they don't. Maybe they've experienced it for themselves, or maybe they're just repeating something that someone else said, you know. And the only way we can know for sure is to try it out, try what they suggest, see what is found. We find it for ourselves. Then we can read books, we can read scripture, We can listen to teachers. It's enjoyable. It's enjoyable to listen to someone someone else's expression of it, seeing the same reality but expressing it differently. It's enjoyable, but just to believe it is not fruitful. So this whole question of certainty, just to allow ourselves just to drop that there's no actual benefit in, trying to decide or figure out which are the right set of beliefs. All beliefs are mm, only at best relatively true. No belief is absolutely true. All beliefs are concepts. No concept is the entirety. So we can take all beliefs as maybe helpful if we try it out for ourselves and see if it leads anywhere, see if it produces fruit, see if it produces deeper understanding. Given time, sure, given attention, given energy, some diligence, all of that's good, right? But this journey is not something that's founded on belief or certainty or being absolutely sure that I know the right answer. It's finding out what's true for ourselves. And when we're willing to drop into uncertainty, what happens is, the blinders come off, the window opens, some fresh air comes in. We're willing to see the subtleties and complexities of life. We're willing to look at our own, role and, what's transpired in our own life. We're just available to see what is truly there, rather than looking at things through the smudged lens of our own conditioning. That's the possibility.